Welcome to PuppetConf. How many of you have been to a PuppetConf before? A couple people, okay. I guess this is one of my favorite times of year because we could talk about automation nonstop for 2 days straight, and that's one of my favorite topics. So this discussion is going to be largely about automation. What you're not going to see is a ton of source code up on slides. This is much more about thought-provoking points, I guess, the things I wish I would have known before I started trying to automate infrastructure. So this is actually how I do slides. You can give me a PowerPoint template all day long, and it's just not going to happen. So that's just me. Welcome to PuppetConf. You can follow me on Twitter if you care to. I say stupid things on the internet, just like everyone else. This is me. This is my bio slide that I use over and over and over again. I wrote a book called Pro OpenSSH in 2005. I encourage you to buy it and not read it. That way I get royalties and you don't get dumber. EPEL. I was one of the guys who founded the EPEL repository. If you guys are CentOS or RHEL users, you probably know what EPEL is. There were 7 of us, I think in 2005, that started complaining about not having the right packages there. And I jumped in on that. So I am really, really passionate about packaging and software delivery and deployment, and that's really what got me into automation as well. And of course, I work at Puppet Labs and have for a couple years. Getting started with Puppet. What I want to talk about are patterns for a successful Puppet deployment. And I use patterns. I don't use the word best practice. Best implies I know all possible options and all of your variables. I don't. Patterns are generally good ideas. Sometimes they won't work for you. You may be in a situation where, one of these patterns fails miserably. You may be in a position where somebody else declares something a best practice and it's the worst idea you've ever heard. So I talk about patterns and automation way more often than I talk about best practices. So why do we automate? This is really where it comes down to, where you start thinking about the problems. And everybody thinks speed right away for automation. The reason I automate is speed. And that's great. That's absolutely a reason you should be automating things. When I was running a team at a very large company, consistency was the main reason I wanted to automate. I had sysadmins that were swapping in and out of roles. I had new infrastructure people all the time. I wanted consistency in the infrastructure way more than I cared about how fast that infrastructure was deploying. So consistency to me was the most important thing. And the last thing is, if I can automate away the problems that I keep having, I can move on to the problems I want to be solving. The more fun problems, the problems that are either more business related or just more fun technologically, or just interesting, or I can get to the bar on time, whatever it is that you want to do. That's why we automate. So the first pattern is picking the right things to automate. And I know during the keynotes this morning it was, don't do it if you can't automate it. That's a great mantra. If you're starting from nothing, that also sounds like an impossible hill to climb. So pick the right things to start with. Most people think, I want to dive in for high value. This is where a lot of projects get funded in corporations. They think, I want to work on automating SAP end to end. I'm like, so do I. Totally, so do I. But it's very difficult. So you think, I want DB clusters, I want my big ERP solutions, I want my middleware. And these are the absolute worst things to start with on your automation project. They are very complicated. They're very complex. They are requiring crazy versions of libmotif to be installed just to run the installer. So you want to graph everything kind of on your cost and value chart. And this is a very advanced chart that I spent lots of times with our designer on. Cost. The cost is your time, and how complex is it? People can say OpEx is free or headcount time is free. It's not. You have an hourly rate. You are costing your company money. You are costing yourself your time. That is not free. The complexity, again, ERP systems, super, super complex. Lots of interdependencies, lots of problems. So then value. Value comes in at, how often am I running into this issue? Those are the first things I want to automate. If I hit them every day and they're a pain in my butt, I want them automated. And then variability. Can I solve this thing this same way every time? How many if statements do I need? How much flow control do I need around what I'm automating? If I don't need a lot, it's probably the perfect thing to start with. I'll get into real examples in a bit too. So using my highly advanced graphing technique, I was able to plot where things land roughly in terms of cost versus value. And in the upper left hand, you have, this is the highest cost and the lowest value. The bottom left is the lowest cost, lowest value. Like automating the way my account is set up on every system, valuable to me, not valuable to a lot of other people. But it's pretty easy to do. So that's why it's in the bottom left-hand corner. Up and right, the upper right, you see the very complicated things, middleware, database, ERP somewhere over there. High value, but really high cost. So where you really want to start is definitely on the bottom half of the chart. Bottom left or right really doesn't make a huge difference if you're really just learning, but push the value toward the right more. Things that are the same on all systems are a great place to start. Syslog is one of my absolute favorite places to start with automation for two reasons. One, it's usually pretty simple to gather all your logs in one spot. Two, it's usually pretty easy to automate. And three, which I think I said I had two reasons, but I'm going to come up with a third right now, is that the configuration is the same. And like when you have all the logs there, you're actually better sysadmins. So already you're delivering value by automating one thing. I can look at logs in one place. I can see problems in my environment. So low cost, the configuration items you know are the things you should start with for automation. And low variability, which I think I hit on. But things that are different, like if you have 85 syslog servers that are collecting, if they start with a letter Q on this host name, they route to over here. And if they start with a letter Z, they route to over here. Maybe it's not the right thing to do. Pick something that's kind of the same everywhere. So optimize for frequency and optimize for fleet-wide impact. And when I say fleet, I basically mean everything you're managing. If it's the same on every single endpoint, that's where you should start with your automation. So I usually go breadth. It's the same everywhere. Syslog, like I said, is one of my favorite places to start. Host keys, so that when I SSH into the next box, it doesn't say, do you trust this key? And everybody just types yes anyway. You can get all those on the systems. Managing accounts, especially if you have local accounts for all of your system administrators, and maybe you have an external authentication source for everybody else that's not a system administrator or whatever. I also like accounts on LDAP. I'm a huge LDAP fanboy. We can talk about that in the hallway anytime you want. And then monitoring configuration is another thing, because most hosts have at least a set of core monitoring that is the same. I usually care about disk-based monitoring. I usually care about, can this thing talk to the network? If those are happening and I can get those automated, I've already provided value by doing simple things lots of times. Look, I learned how to use Keynote for one slide. Pick the right things to automate. That was the first pattern. Pattern 2. Don't learn two things at once. This is basically saying, don't try to automate something while you're learning it. This happens all the time. I talk to people every day that are trying to automate. They're like, oh, I want to play with Riak. It's the coolest thing since sliced bread, I think. And you're like, OK, right on. Riak's pretty cool. And they're like, so I need a Puppet module to automate my installation of Riak. And I'm like, have you found a use case for Riak anywhere? Like, do you know what you're going to do with it? Do you know why you need it? Are you good at it? Can you tell if it's working? If you can't, probably not a good time to start with the automation side of it. The other thing that I see people do all the frickin' time is they try to automate their automation framework as the very first thing you do. This is dumb. Don't do it. This has cost friends of mine years of their life because they like, Puppet sucks because it can't deploy itself and blah, blah, blah. It can't bootstrap itself. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of a hard problem. I wrote part of the way that Puppet Enterprise bootstraps itself, and it's a hard problem. Automating your automation framework with the automation framework that you're trying to deploy at the same time is not simple. And best case scenario, all you've got now is an automation framework. You still haven't provided any value to anybody else using any services on your network. So, really, if you take one thing away from this entire presentation, that's it. Do not automate your automation framework as your first project. And the reason is when things go wrong, you don't know why. Something goes wrong, back to my Riak example. Is it because I don't know what the hell I'm doing with Riak? Or is it because I'm not good at Puppet, or I'm not good at my automation tool? And the answer is, I don't know. I have two variables. I need one variable to prove out scientific methods. So the way that I work with automation, and I talked to several other people at Puppet Labs that have done successful deployments of Puppet, and I said, what are the things that you wish you had learned? And 3-pass automation came up from Eric Chameau, and he's incredible. He's giving some talks on continuous delivery and stuff later this week. You should definitely check them out. The first step is actually figure it out. So in Riak, I like to play with Riak. I don't know how it works. I know I have to install some Erlang. I know I have to get some keys set up and some buckets made or whatever. And I start setting it up. I learn about that thing. I didn't mention Puppet once in there, and that was absolutely by design. I'm trying to learn about the technology before I automate it. The second pass is refine your setup. Okay, well, I can go through my shell history and see that I installed this package, then I removed this one, then I needed the devel headers for this other thing, and then I had to RM something, and I had CD in this directory and build some stuff, and then I got lost. Oh, and then I decided that I was going to check the internet for Twitter for a while, and then I got sidetracked, and basically refine the setup. Get it down to the steps that it actually takes to do it. And now your third step is really getting into declarative state. Once you have figured out the technology, you figured out exactly the steps to get it going, now start thinking about your automation solution. Because once you know it, it's actually way easier to automate. Learning and automating at the same time, not ideal. So we're going to pick the right things to automate, and we're not going to try and learn two things at once. Once you have Puppet on your box or on your systems, you have a wealth of information available to you. And this is before you're automating really anything. You just have Puppet running. You have a Puppet agent out there. It's checking into a master. It's checking into a console. Inventory service is one of the first things that can make you make good decisions about your infrastructure. Cool, that came up pretty nicely. So inventory service shows up just data. When Factor runs, Factor's a fact collection agent that runs on all your systems before Puppet runs. It tells you things about how much RAM you have, what's your IP address, what's your MAC address, what version of Puppet and Ruby are we on, just basic, true information about your system. Facts, if you will. And you can write custom ones on top of that, which we'll talk about in a minute. But just having this reporting in, I know a lot of Windows administrators that once they got this stuff reporting in on Windows systems, they were able to see things that they had never seen before, never queried before. And the same thing happens in the Linux realm all the time. I can see how much processor counts I have on every box and cores, and just basic hardware information can make you make good decisions. Here's another example with just some different stuff pulled out. Custom facts. You can write custom facts fairly easily. And there's two ways to do this. Well, there's really more than two, but I'll talk about two. Ruby is the base way that we've talked about for years. Ruby is scary to some people. That's okay. The facts is actually one of the easiest little Ruby snippets you can write. We have some good documentation on doing it. But I have an even easier way for you to get facts into that report. And that's we have a thing called facts.d, which is basically just drop key value pairs. Like this variable equals this. So I could say, who do I contact about this box? Who's the technical approver for changes? I could say technical approver equals Michael Stahnke. And that would be a factor or a fact that would show up when Factor runs. It would show up in this inventory service screen. And right away, my NOC picks up something and they say, oh, there's something going on, I need to make a change. Who do I contact? Mike Stahnke's on there because that was a custom fact that somebody wrote. On this screen, at least PE version, PE major minor patch, and OS mage version are all custom facts that are being pulled in, and Postgres default version are all custom facts that were pulled in this example. So you can't even tell what's custom and what's not. It's just they're first-class citizens. Live management. Live management is kind of the graphical front end for mCollective and our message bus architecture in Puppet Enterprise. You can learn a lot about your infrastructure this way. And learning about your infrastructure will make you automate your infrastructure more betterly, obviously, in better ways. So this is just showing us that there's differences across our systems. I have a couple systems selected on the left-hand side. The password for root is not the same on all the nodes, and it's highlighting that. Okay, so I've learned something. I like to have the same password everywhere, or I don't, depending on what my policies are. But now I know. The RAL. is one of the most powerful features of Puppet. Again, when I was talking to everybody that had run major Puppet deployments at Puppet Labs and just saying, what do you wish you had known early? This came up from every single person. RAL stands for Resource Abstraction Layer. It is the thing that made Puppet interesting to me over CF Engine or ISConf or the other tools that were available in 2006. I can say package, ensure present. I don't have to know if that was a yum call, if that was an apt-get call, if that was calling out to ports. It's abstracted. Resources are abstracted at the appropriate level, and the RAL does that. I think this is something we don't tout enough about Puppet, and I'm going to do it. So the RAL is awesome. So Puppet resource is the command line way to interact with the RAL. We used to have a thing called Roush, which was just the RAL shell, but it was merged into core Puppet. So it's Puppet resource. Cool, looks good as well. So I can say Puppet resource package elfutils, which is just an example that I was contriving for this presentation exactly. Elfutils comes out and it gives me the version. So I could copy paste that code right into my Puppet manifest and it will work perfectly. And I like that. And almost all resources work that well. There are a couple that have some caveats. Now, are there other parameters that I could be passing package? Sure, I could say I just want to make sure it's installed. I don't care what version it is. I could say make sure it's never installed, ensure it's absent. I mean, there's other things you can do, but you can learn about your system. And if you just run Puppet resource package and don't give it that last argument, it will output that for every single package on your system. Another cool thing you can do is, this is the same example with users. And as you can see, it gives us way more information about a user object than it did about a package. A package is pretty much, is it there or is it not? A user has a lot of attributes. My username is Stahnke. I'm present. I have a G-code field. This is Michael Stahnke. I have a GID. I have groups. I have a home directory and password aging and all this stuff. And so this is I'm stepping into automation. I really am not super familiar with Puppet, but I can ask Puppet, tell me what this object looks like. I can copy paste that into a manifest, and now I can apply that manifest onto the second system. So now I at least have two systems that look the same. I have the same UID, the same GID. I'm in the same groups. That's very powerful. You can learn a lot about your system this way. Puppet describe is another thing that actually I just learned about during preparing for this talk. I'd either already known and forgotten about it completely, or I just learned about it and I don't know which one it was. But Puppet describe is kind of amazing. I realize that looks pretty small. I typed Puppet describe cron up there. And all it's doing is outputting everything about the way that Puppet interacts with cron. It tells me what it's doing, why it's doing it, gives you example code, and it just keeps scrolling. There's no way I could have fit all this on one slide. But we do this for every resource type that's in Puppet. So you can say, Puppet describe user, Puppet describe group, Puppet describe, SE Linux settings if you want to. It's just really, really nice. Gives you tons of information. I don't need to remember the URL. I don't need to search Google to find things. It's in line with there. I think it's great. And the examples obviously make it very, very usable. No-op. So no-op was kind of an instruction set that we had on CPU architecture for a long time. And it was never really part of configuration management in the early designs. If you look at the early kind of config patterns, they didn't have this, tell me what you would have done without doing it. But Puppet does have this. And so the way Puppet runs, you can just say, hey, if I'm out of compliance, you say I want this package installed. If it's not installed, don't actually install it. Just tell me that, hey, this thing isn't installed and I would have installed it if you had told me to. That's no-op. And it is one of the most powerful features of Puppet as well. The RAL and no-op are both very, very exciting to me. The other thing is, if you're not super familiar with different operating systems, because of the way the RAL works with no-op, you can learn about this operating system. I ran RHEL for years. I'm a RHEL guy. I'm a CentOS guy. Like I said, I did stuff with EPEL. I really, really know how RPM and yum work. When I first took a job at Puppet Labs, we ran our infrastructure on Debian. Well, fuck. I don't know Debian very well. So what do? What I actually ended up doing, and I'm not lying, I would just run the Puppet commands and turn on debug mode and see what commands it was running to figure out how to do things. Because I didn't remember how dpackage worked. I didn't remember how apt-get worked. It had been 7 years since I touched a Debian box. I think it was Potato the last time I was playing with it. And which is like, what, 2 releases in Debian years? No. So right here you can see that it's actually telling me I'm running this dpackage query command, I'm running this show format, and I just think that's super powerful. I still use this today if I have to manage anything on a Mac. I cannot figure out how to add users on the command line on a Mac ever. So I run Puppet, I look to see what commands it outputs, and then if I need to do other things with it, I can. You can learn about different operating systems by tracing the other direction through the RAL, and I think this is super awesome. There's also some tooling available. Geppetto came in through our Cloudsmith acquisition, and we had been talking to Cloudsmith for a long time about the way that they saw developer tooling working with Puppet. And they were way ahead of anything we were going to come out with. Obviously, we just bought them. Geppetto is an Eclipse-based IDE for running Puppet modules. And it's really, really nice in that it does syntax completion. You can mouse over something and it gives you the documentation. You can say, I'm writing Puppet 2.6 or 2.7 or 3.0, and it will validate syntax based on which version you're writing. That's just a selectable parameter in there. It'll autocomplete. It'll say, you probably spelled this class name wrong in your require because I don't see this class anywhere else in your module path. It's really, really helpful if you're really trying to get started. It's Eclipse-based. Some people love that. Some people don't like that so much. That's okay. I think it's a very powerful tool. Some of the other interaction stuff that you can do with it, like running tests and stuff kind of just in line with Eclipse, is pretty cool. The other side of that's Vim. I suppose you could use Emacs. I don't, so I'm not going to talk about it. In Vim, we have, syntax highlighting has been there forever. We now have macros that will, line up your arrows here. So like when you type something, you hit space, it just lines up all the arrows. So that, the stuff is neater to read, it's cleaner, it's easier to share with others. So there's some good tooling here. We have IDEs, we have live management, we have the inventory service, we have custom facts, we have the route, we have no-op. So these are all tools that I'm using to learn about my infrastructure and learn about what's going on. And I haven't even automated anything yet. This is just learning. And then you also have a community. Obviously, we have a giant Puppet community. Largest channel on automation on Freenode by far. I think we're the 10th largest channel overall on Freenode, which is kind of crazy. But IRC, mailing lists, ask.puppetlabs.com, our forge. There's a lot of places to get good information about this stuff. And we have, of course, have puppetlabs.com/learn, which you can sign up for classes and stuff like that. So we're going to pick the right things to automate based on cost and value. We're going to learn about what we want to automate before we try to automate it. And you can use some of the Puppet tooling to make you more productive in both your automation quest and in learning about your infrastructure. This is the most controversial pattern. I'll tell you that right now. Starting simple and staying simple is not simple. I work at Puppet Labs. Turns out Puppet Labs has some people that are really freaking good at Puppet. Sometimes being really good at Puppet means they get really complicated really quickly. You talk about, well, I just want to install 2 web servers and have a load balancer in front of it. And I'm thinking, that's, 4 or 5 modules, maybe, it's a couple hundred lines of automation code. They come back with, this 10,000 line thing that has, error handling up through everything. And, it's also scalable out to 100,000 nodes in case you want to do this n times. And it's just like, this is great. It's awesome. It is really complicated to work on. It's really complicated for me. And so everybody's guilty of this. You think you need to go up to the next level of complexity. Stay at the level you're at as long as you can. It will be easier for you to learn. It will be easier for you to teach your coworkers. It will be easier for you to get the simple things done. And getting lots of simple things done is extremely valuable versus getting a few complicated things done, depending on how often they're happening. So the other thing when you're automating to think about when you want to stay simple is if what you're automating is a bad idea to start with, you just get crap, but faster and on a more regular cadence. So that's really not what you're looking for. So think about what you're automating, why you're automating it, and deliver on a good process. And the main thing that really boiled down to in my discussions with the guys at Puppet Labs was small, single-purpose modules. A lot of people start out with a monolithic module, like I'm going to have the WebSphere module, and it's going to deploy, WebSphere and Java, and it's going to get the IBM, SDK, motif, crap, and opt, and all this stuff going on, right? That's a horrible idea. It will not work. And the reason is, the next time you need something else that requires Java, you're going to have a conflict. Well, I needed Java. That should have been abstracted. That should have been a separate module. Or I needed a web server. That should have been separate. Or I needed user accounts that looked like A, B, and C. That should have been separate. Having lots and lots of small modules is a really, really good pattern. Modules like do one thing well. You learn that about Unix like in your first week as a Unix administrator. Modules are the same way. My most popular module on the Forge, and I don't have a ton of them. I do a lot with the Puppet Labs modules, but Stahnke has a few, is an EPEL module. It's just called Stahnke/EPEL. All it does is set up the EPEL repository. That's it. It is included as a dependency in hundreds of other modules. Why? Not because it's amazing, but it does one thing exactly, and it does it well. And that's kind of the reuse pattern. So it can be reused easily because it doesn't make assumptions of, well, when you wanted EPEL, you actually also wanted RPM Forge, and you wanted to install MP3 codecs, and you wanted all this other stuff. No, I didn't, actually. I just wanted my single package repository. So take time measurements to think about what you want to automate. What I did with my team, literally once a month, I would go through a report of every single incident ticket that came into our help desk. And I would say, what do we have? How many of them do we have? And I'd find, okay, we got 600 tickets this month. We resolved 580 of them. 230 of them were setting up printers. On large AIX boxes around the world, we were printing contracts. Okay, what if I didn't have to do that anymore? How much time does that take? And we figured it all out. Okay, it's about 3/4 of a person in terms of time. It's not a ton of time, but it's not none. And it's happening 240 times. How many of those happened more than once because we messed it up? About another 40. Okay, so it's really happening 280 times. So now we're up to almost a full person. If I can save a full person through automation, that's pretty damn good. So we took some time measurements and we did that. We'd spend a month on it. I'd be like, this month we're automating print queue setups on AIX. That was all I worked on. And at the end of that month, I had saved a person. And that's how I selected what I wanted to automate. The other ways you can do things are, what are the first things you do whenever a system comes online? And this is the first thing that I do whenever a system comes online. I actually did this the other night. I was just sitting there at home. I spun up a VM, and I was like, what do I actually do? I did it all manually, and I wrote down some steps. There were a lot. And a lot of these are really, really simple. Installing Vim with color and syntax highlighting, I literally do it every time I spin up a box. It's 3 lines in Puppet. Actually, it's 1 line if you want to do cuddle braces. But it's really simple to do. And so what are all these other things that I do? Those are great places to start with automation. At least make it so your sysadmins have a better life before you can try making everybody else have a better life. If you guys aren't getting value out of your automation suite and out of Puppet, your customers aren't either. If you don't believe in it, if it's not helping you, they won't believe in it. It won't help them. So then it was delivering units of value. How do I've done the kind of the first 10, 20 things that happen when I build up a system. I've automated those. I really believe in Puppet. How do I get my management team to believe in Puppet and Puppet Labs and all the stuff they're doing? And the first thing I did was to contact my database people. So start simple, stay simple. Now push the value. Iteration. This is kind of a misnamed pattern, but I couldn't think of a better name because there's 2 hard problems in computer science. Naming things, cache invalidation, and off by 1 errors. Iteration. Get better. Start over. Work on it again. I have a module. Okay, it only handled CentOS. Now I need it to handle Fedora as well. Now I need it to handle Debian. Add it. Iterate on it. Version control it. This chart was something I wrote for an article 2.5 years ago, and I still like it a lot. And it's not really because I want to pimp my ideas. It's because I still think it's how people should approach configuration management. It just starts very simply. And these slides will be available, so if you can't read it all, I'm not going to read it to you. But basically it says, you want to go through a journey on how you do configuration management. At the bottom you have, my systems are handcrafted by artisans. And I live in Portland, so we're really into free-range bits. But centralized, and then you can move up to centralized, where you have, all my configurations are centralized in some way, but they're labeled with .back or .mic or .date, and I just don't have them version controlled. They're just kind of all sitting in a pile. Level 3, you're normalized, and then you get into version control. Congratulations, you're now sane. Level 4, you start templating, you start abstracting data, you start moving into more, I'm approaching reusability, but it's really about my site reusability. I can share my work with my coworker, and they're cool with it, and they get it. We can speak the same languages, we can talk together, and both accomplish goals. And then level 5 is all about reusability. I've abstracted my data out of my modules. I've abstracted things using either Hira or other data injection technologies. Now I can share that module on the Forge. It's usable for other people. They can get value out of the work I've done. There wasn't any secret sauce in there. So that's kind of the journey that you want to iterate on. And I've seen organizations that were all the way at 5 go back to 1 because they couldn't figure out how to automate something. And I've seen people go from 1 to 5 very quickly. Most people get stuck between 3 and 4. And it turns out you don't need to be at 5. You don't need to be at a place where I can share every piece of infrastructure automation with every other company. There are certain cases where that's extremely valuable. There are certain cases where it's really stupid. So again, it's patterns and not best practices. Learn from developers. Also in the iteration paradigm, take what you've learned watching developers do work and apply it to Puppet. That's versioning your code. Like I said, at level 3, you reach sanity. If you're not versioning your Puppet code in some way, please do, unless you're the only guy who works on it. If you're the only person who works on it, I really don't care if you version it. If you work with up to 1 other person, you should be versioning your code. Have a lab. I learned Puppet in a lab environment that I blew up literally every day for a month. Either I would blow it up because I wrote really, really bad Puppet ideas, or at night, at midnight, it just reset itself because I decided that I should be able to rebuild anything I'm doing. I'm using Puppet. Turns out, once you start just repaving your machines, you will figure out what you're doing every day. It was a little painful, but it really helped. And people say, well, how did you have time to do that? Weren't you fighting all these fires? Weren't you working on incident tickets? And I was. Working 16-hour days isn't awesome. That's what I was doing. So, but then you have to improve your workflows with that. You're working with a lab, you're working with partners, you're working with other teams. Like, I was just about to tell a story about this database team. I was trying to sell Puppet to my manager and being like, this is awesome. You need to give us more time to work on this. It will save us time in the long run. This is an investment rather than a cost. And what finally tipped the scale was when I added a checkbox on our server provisioning application that just installed the Oracle client. Not a huge fan of having to install Oracle clients. Turns out our DBAs weren't either. They would much rather spend time on rack and making sure that we're tuning properly and all this. So I added a button that just all it did was eventually include an Oracle class. It got configured right away. Then the database team came to us, what else can you do? Suddenly, then we had budget. So that's a great way to solve problems. And then, of course, refactoring. That Oracle module went through at least 4 major rewrites. The first time it was just, well, we're just going to set up the package. The next time it was, well, we're going to set up the package and configure TNS names and get all those things right. And the third time it was, we're going to give you options about which databases you want to be able to talk to and which ones you don't, things like that. One of the other things you'll hear from Puppet Labs employees especially is execs are horrible. Exec is a resource type in Puppet that basically is run this command or run this script. The reason it's horrible, or labeled horrible, is that it breaks the model. I can't tell what's happening once you run an exec. If you exec out to a Perl script that sets up something, all I can tell is what the exit code was on that script. If it was even written with good exit codes. If the script is just exit 0, it's a success every time it runs, no matter what. And so I can't tell what happened. I can't really use no-op on it very well. I can say I would have run this script, but I don't know what the result would have been because I just would have run it. So exec is a little weird. You can move over to define type, which is kind of a collection of things going on. It might be, well, I'm really setting up a file, I'm setting up permissions, I'm setting up a user. You can do all those things. And that's a defined type, and that's a little better because the model can handle that a little more. And then you can get into fully modeled. And so this is a journey. A lot of people will say, don't ever start with exec. You know what? Absolutely start with exec. I don't have a problem with it. If it's delivering value, if it's automating, you're getting consistent stuff, you're getting it faster, and you're having time to work on more important problems, exec is solving problems. This is where I say it's a pattern. Other people would say it's a worst practice. I'm okay with that. You can make your own choices on this. There are trade-offs. Exec is against a model, but exec does get things done. Sometimes getting things done is way more important than being philosophically pure. So back to this. You've configured, you're automating, you're iterating. You're trying to work your way up the journey to being, I'm a fully modeled, fully reusable infrastructure. I could walk into anywhere and manage it using these reusable building blocks. It's cool. You're working your way up. Those are the kinds of thought processes you really want to have when you're automating. You want to be better. If you're not trying to continuously improve both your automation, your skill level on your team, you're not going to succeed. My favorite thing about Puppet has nothing to do with technology. My absolute favorite thing about Puppet was in 2007, I was starting to play with this. Everybody I talked to about it, I learned something from. Every single person on the mailing list. I learned about new ways to do monitoring, new ways to do backups, new ways to do database offline, hot backups. It was just crazy. Sometimes we didn't talk about Puppet for weeks. But I learned from the best sysadmins in the world at the time. And I still feel like that's what Puppet is. It's a collection of amazing system administrators. Get help from the community, ask questions, learn things. That is my favorite part of Puppet and Puppet Labs. It will make you better at automating, which will make you better at your job. So, before you get started with Puppet, or as you're getting started with Puppet, what are the right things to do? Pick the right things to automate. Don't learn two things at the same time. Emphasis on don't try and automate your automation tool as your first project. Use the Puppet tooling to make you better. Start simple and stay simple for as long as possible. And then iterate. And in iteration, again, I don't love the name on that bullet. Learn from developers. Take their practices. Take their version control ideas. Take their deployment ideas. Take their tooling. Take their IDEs. They have good ideas. They've been doing this for a very long time. Infrastructure people can do it as well. This is pictures of cats. Because every presentation needs them. I am done talking about what I was going to talk about. So if you have questions, there's a microphone in the center aisle. I am happy to answer nearly any question. And I'm also available in the hallways. I will talk about Puppet and automation literally in my sleep. Ask my wife. But it is just, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy you guys are at PuppetConf. I hope you learned a little bit about thought process and approach to Puppet. There are several other talks going on about what to do in terms of getting started with syntax and how to build great modules and how to build reusable modules. I think Ryan Coleman's giving one later this afternoon on a lot of Forge content. His will be great. So just, I really hope you enjoy the conference, but I'm willing to take any question you guys have as well. Can you get up, step up to the mic just so the recording can hear you? It's not that I don't think you can yell, I do.
What's the difference between the audit switch versus the no-op? Is there a big difference?
Yes. That's an interesting question. There's a switch in Puppet called audit, and basically what that does is it will turn in the state of a resource to a report. It will not tell you if it would have changed it. So it will tell you this file exists and these are the permissions, like if you're auditing a file. That's all it'll tell you. That'll come in the report every time. On no-op, it could be, I want this file to be 644. It's actually sitting at 777. And no-op would be like, I would have made this change because it's not what you told me to have it at. So those are kind of the differences. There's more under the hood in terms of differences, but that's kind of the high level is one will tell you exactly what's going on, and one will tell you that this is what's going on and it's wrong. Any other questions? All right. If not, I hope you guys have a spectacular time at PuppetConf. Thank you so much for being here.